It's now my honor, trustees, to welcome a special guest to address the board. You all know Brian Lamb. He is the chairman of the board of the State University System for the state of Florida, Board of Governors. He also has dedicated the majority of his adult life to higher education in the state of Florida. Being a two-time graduate of the University of South Florida, Brian has served on the Board of Trustees as well as the chairman of their board. So he has really dedicated, as I said, a large portion of his adult life to higher education here in the state of Florida, and we're grateful for that. In his other full-time job, Brian is the managing director and segment head for middle market banking and specialized industries, covering the Northeast United States for J.P. Morgan Chase Commercial Banking. What you may not know is that Brian and I thought that our paths were going to cross earlier in our career in different careers, as Brian was well on his way to becoming an NBA basketball player, playing basketball at the University of South Florida, and unfortunately, his career was ended by a rotator cuff injury, and he had to refocus himself on his way to the banking industry.
He still thinks he can play, though.
Oh, I know he thinks he can play. But we are fortunate that he has taken the path that he has, and we are grateful for his leadership in the State University System. We are grateful for his support of UCF, and certainly, the work that we have done to address the workforce needs of the state of Florida, particularly over the last couple of years, as we work to build our new nursing building, to address the workforce needs in the nursing industry. And I believe he is very much on board with our vision of becoming Florida's premier engineering and technological university, and appreciate his support in this year's legislative budget request, as we've made a significant request, as you know, addressing the growth of our engineering and computer science programs as well. So it's my honor to welcome to the podium to address the board and to answer your questions the chair of the State University System of the state of Florida, Mr. Brian Lamb. Well, wait a minute. Before you begin, how did we ever get a UCF grad to wear, or USF grad to wear UCF tie?
I think it looks good on me.
It looks very good on you. We have to have you wear it at the State University board meeting.
That's right, which we will be back soon. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good to see you. I hope you all are doing well. Before I start my comments, I just would like to acknowledge a dear friend, an outstanding leader, obviously for your university, but frankly, a trusted advisor to me and this state of Florida. President Cartwright, I want you to know from the bottom of my heart, from the State University System and the Lamb family, we're thinking about you, my friend, okay? Safe travels back, Godspeed, and I look forward to seeing you soon and giving you a big hug, buddy. So, it's special to be here. Chair Martins, Vice Chair Mills, the Board of Trustees. Chair Martin will tell you that I've been looking forward to spending some time with you. I think you all have done an outstanding job. I look at the trajectory of the University of Central Florida, and I get pretty excited about it. As a banker, I like numbers. And when I look at the numbers for UCF, it would be a place I would make an investment. If UCF were a ticker symbol and I were standing on Wall Street, I'd have you as a buy. This is a place that the state of Florida should be making an investment. This is a place that I think our students, our great faculty and staff have earned the right to keep chasing greatness. I think today in your board meeting, you covered off on a number of stats. You talked a lot about U.S. News and World Reports and national rankings. You talked about performance inside and outside the classroom. I will try not to be redundant. I think the data is pretty clear. You're onto something. You're onto something. 1963. It's a pretty special year for this university. That was the beginning. It wasn't too long ago. That was only 60 years. Most of the universities that I interact with in the Northeast have about a 200-year head start on you. And I got to tell you, you're on their heels, right? If you look at in the state of Florida from an innovation standpoint, you're at the top. You're 14th in the country. Every company that I touch around the United States and outside the world, innovation is probably one of their top priorities. How do they modernize their business? How do they leverage AI and manage cybersecurity? And how do they bring elite ideas into the organization to be transformational? They're going to come knock on your door looking for talent, looking for ideas, looking for research. I think you're well positioned. In the state of Florida, I think you've done a heck of a job being a great partner to the other 11 institutions. I personally can attest that I call President Cartwright just about every time we need to make a big decision. I reach out to him because I trust his judgment, his expertise, and quite frankly, his track record of driving outcomes. If I think about UCF, and I think about where you guys are headed, let me touch a little bit on the state university system. Over the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen a pretty transformational change in our operating model, right? So our funding strategies have gone up significantly from the state of Florida. Our governor and the legislature have been very supportive of the strategies that have come out of this room. Just last year alone, we were up over 20% in funding into the state university system, and I don't think we're done, because we're getting outcomes. It's really important at UCF that we invest and we look at the legislative budget request, Alex. I think you're spot on. I think you are making thoughtful recommendations, ones that we understand. And frankly, when I look at the requests coming from this board, I go back and I look at the outcomes that we're getting. Your performance in performance-based funding, the results around your national rankings, the research, your focus on engineering. I applaud that. It's really easy to be a very large institution and get distracted. We're pretty big. We're a small country bank, small town up in New York City, and 300,000 employees, 100 countries around the world. It's very easy for us to get distracted, right? But if Jamie were here and we're in our meetings, one of the things he talks about is don't suffer the ABCs. Greatness can be interrupted, can come off track, and in many ways derail outstanding institutions like UCF if you suffer the ABCs. You know what the ABCs are? Arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. Fundamentally, if you look at the most transformational companies and leaders in the world, they don't suffer the ABCs. They're humble, with a good balance of confidence. They don't allow bureaucracy to get in the way of making good decisions to drive change. And they are absolutely restless about being the very best in the world, so they aren't complacent. And I believe UCF has those same attributes. I appreciate the push that you give the president, that you give the Board of Governors. I can reach out to your chair and vice chair anytime, and I know they will give me perspective and feedback, and they do it well. A lot of the things that I think about and ultimately have to make decisions around are informed by this board. When we work with the governor and the legislature, we've been a bit bold over the last couple of years. Over my 2-year term, I think we are up materially in the amount of operating funds that we've invested in the state university system. I think UCF's been an appropriate beneficiary of that. recurring funds allow you to change outcomes over time and make longer-term decisions. You also are the benefactor of the investments we made in faculty, and I want to spend a minute on faculty. We will not achieve the outcomes we need without great faculty. Positioning them to perform at a high level, giving them the space to do the research they need, and making sure that they're consistently delivering outcomes at an elite level. Last year, for the first time, we specifically put dollars to work that the regulations mandated it goes directly to faculty, and faculty that are driving outcomes. That is going to continue to be on my agenda. As long as I'm in the chair, my goal in the BOG is to continue to invest in faculty, and you're going to see that put forth in our current legislative budget requests. The other item I would raise is around regulation. There's a lot of it. Trust me, I'm in the banking business. I know what regulation looks like. There's a lot in higher ed as well. I'm doing my best to deliver on the commitment that I made to your chair to try to deregulate where we can the BOG. We've been able to eliminate 20 to 25 regulations. We're not done. I'd like to see us do more. Your staff are working hard to address some of the regulations that are out there. It creates a lot of workload, quite frankly, a little bureaucracy. And when we can remove those challenges and get rid of regulation that don't add value, trust me, your staff is in a much better place. Your president's able to operate his institution with much more agility. And frankly, there's a level of trust that we have to have in your board. So that will be something I also continue to ask you to help us find regulations, things that don't add value that we should look at. We don't always get it right, and I'm more than willing to listen to feedback. I think it's important. I want to create that environment for you. When you think about the long term, a couple things I'd have this board consider. National rankings are super important. Athletics, super important. All the things that we celebrate around outcomes are important, but we fundamentally cannot lose sight of the student. Fundamentally, when the day is done, right? And so I would ask that this board continue, because you're doing it and your president is doing it, keep the student at the center of your strategies. A large percentage of how you measure success should be based on student outcomes. I've looked at your strategic plan. I think you're absolutely on your way to doing that, and as you refresh that plan for the next 3 to 5 years, have productive conflict in this room that are we leaning in enough for students? Are we continuing to drive down debt? 75% of our students in the state of Florida don't have debt, right? Like, that's a materially different number than it was 5 to 7 years ago. Affordability in the state of Florida for our students that are in this great state, giving them a top profile institution of which they can get a degree and be able to afford it, priority. Degrees where they can get great jobs in the competitive environment. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll be back here at UCF for our annual Trustee Summit. Thank you for hosting us. There will be 200 more of our friends that we will bring along, and they will get a chance to just get a taste of what's so special about UCF. But in that session, working with your chair, we're laying out an agenda where we're going to talk a lot about innovation. We're going to talk a lot about what we're doing to drive outcomes for students. You're going to hear best practices. You'll be able to be in the room with other trustees and hear some of the challenges that they're up against as well. So as I wrap up, because I want to save time for questions, my quick thoughts. When I look at your results, I said up front I get pretty excited. I cautioned you to be thoughtful around the ABCs. I think that's a very interesting discipline to think through that will keep us all on our toes. But my last comment starts with leadership. You have an outstanding leader. And trust me, I know how hard it is to find a great president. You've got one. You've got one that I think we rely on to help us be great as a state university system, and you sure have one that's helping you continue your trajectory. So I started with my opening comments to Alex. I'm going to close, President Cartwright, with my comments to you. We owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude in this state university system for your leadership. I hope that you continue to challenge the university and challenge us to be great. Like you always say, we don't get it right every time, but we have to be willing to listen and learn from each other, and I think you've embodied that. Chair Martins, I want to thank you and Vice Chair Mills and this entire board for giving me a chance to spend time with you. As you can see, I care immensely for this great state. My father was a school teacher for 40 years in the state university system. My mother worked for the Department of Corrections in the state of Florida. My sister and I both went to public schools throughout the state of Florida and went to college in 2 of our state university systems. This is home. This is important. And you bet it's personal. And I am absolutely committed to helping you all continue to be wildly successful here at UCF for the next 60 years. So I'm wishing you all the best. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your willingness to serve this great state, and go Knights.
Charge on. Thank you, Chair Lamb. Do you have a few moments for questions from the board?
Absolutely, Chair.
Great. The floor is open for questions from the board. Trustee King.
Yes. You mentioned legislative priorities. Could you expand where you're planning to go? Where's the BOG going to be communicating with legislatures? What's your priorities for us?
Sure, absolutely. So let me touch maybe on a few. First, on one's probably near and dear to your heart this time of year, the legislative budget requests. For the BOG, we're going to put forth another $350 million in performance-based funding, which is up, as you know, materially from the prior years. It was about $265. We are all a beneficiary of that here. We were successful last year. We're going to do that again. Faculty, big priority. I'm putting forth $100 million for faculty this year. I don't think we can do enough to continue to invest and reward our faculty, right? I mean, it's critically important. So that is a priority, and we're going to continue to find ways to support them. And then also quickly, a couple of other items financially is improvement. We do have some universities that we would like to see sequential improvement, and I'm going to put some financial rewards on the table for them if they can show multi-year sequential improvement in their performance-based funding. I think that's a great opportunity for institutions as well, so there's money on the table for that. Facilities, you know, things can get old in 60 years, right? And we've got some institutions that are a bit older. And so if you recall, 18 months ago, we were able to secure a little over $400 million to kind of put a dent in a very long-standing issue around deferred capital maintenance. And the governor and the state were very supportive of our strategy, understood it. We're going to continue to lean in there. It's tough, right? There's a lot of priorities around how to use one-time capital, but we're going to put, you know, another $400 million plus, which benefits UCF in many ways based on the sum of the digits and kind of the age of some of your facilities. So that's an important one on the facility side. I think you've got a couple of specific projects in PICO that we're putting forth that will come through as well that kind of stack up well in the rankings. And so those are also going to be priorities for us at the BOG. So we have shared priorities in that regard. Academically, we've got work to do on kind of refreshing some of the approaches to degrees of strategic emphasis. We had a really important kind of update meeting there, I want to say last week. More to do. We want to get that right. There were a couple of questions I got around folks thinking that if it didn't make the degrees of strategic emphasis list that the BOG was going to eliminate it. None of that is true. This board decides what degrees are happening on the respective campuses. And the intent is not in any way to minimize a large number of degrees of which our students are in and can get great jobs. This is about prioritization and how we think about rewarding what we believe the data suggests are degrees where we believe are the future, particularly for Florida. So we're going to spend a little bit, we got some work to do on that. There's a lot going on that topic around in the classroom. I think another big priority for us, there's a lot of policy work in flight. Like we probably in the last 18 to 24 months have pushed more policy through the BOG than I've seen in my 18 plus years or so on a trustee board or the BOG. From accreditation, near and dear to your heart, and the process you're going through there. Thank you for laying the groundwork to a lot of the work that we've obviously had to do on civil discourse. We've got a lot going on with legislative bills, et cetera, that we have to respond to, that the legislature put in place that are policy driven, to the work that we're doing with faculty around post-tenure review. All of that is a heavy lift. And I'm first to admit that we still have work to do to get that perfectly right. I think directionally it's going the right way, but that's policy's way up on the list of priorities. And we'll need your help. And I mentioned earlier that your president has been, a good advisor to me in terms of picking up the phone and when are we on and off track around how to think about things. And then maybe the last thing in the BOG is a priority, frankly, is spending more time with you all. We've got a lot of new trustees, new presidents. I mean, probably out of the 12 institutions, over half have been in seat less than 2 years, right? So there's a lot there. Trustees, same thing, a lot of change at the trustee board, on the trustee board. So just from a governance standpoint, strategic plans being refreshed, there's a lot of work around kind of what are the universities doing, how can the BOG help them be successful in their 3 to 5 year plan. So that's a big one for me is on the outlook. Does that help a little bit?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Good question.
Trustee Greenaway.
Thank you, Chair Lamb, for being here and for your remarks. My question is, what do you foresee being the greatest challenge or roadblock facing the state university system in the coming years?
Well, first of all, nice to meet you. Thank you. I do have the benefit of being in a lot of other highly competitive markets. And the competition is fierce for great faculty, obviously some of the best students. Our Florida students are really doing well and better coming out of high school, and they've got options. And I'd love to see them stay here in the state university system. But, AAU institutions from around the country are parachuting in and swooping up some of our best and brightest. And so the first one is, let's not be confused. We are in a competitive business, and that we fundamentally are competing for talent at the faculty level, the staff level, and for great students. I would put that way up at the list. As you look at your strategic plan, it principally should be built to win, because you are competing and in the ranks of some of the top 50 institutions in America, and they've got a 200-300 year head start. So that keeps me up at night. Are we losing the best and brightest? Are we able to recruit and afford to pay our great faculty? So put talent at the top. I think I see my friend Harold Mills, who I know has always been an amazing businessman. I'm sure he would tell you, and he was in the talent business. It's fierce. So that's probably what keeps me up. The second thing is, look, the economy has been able to manage through a tough couple of cycles. We are a resilient nation and a resilient state, but we still should be prepared for very tough times economically. And our students and faculty and our communities experience that in ways that could be hard. And so one of the things I would ask all of the institutions to do is, in the event we do not have as soft of a landing as we might think from an economy standpoint, and there become headwinds in the great state of Florida and frankly nationally, geopolitically, there's a lot going on that isn't necessarily for this room to solve, but we should be watching. All of those things could create economic headwinds. And so you've got a strategy group here, you've got a board. I would just be thinking about if you had headwinds and you had downturns and you had a downturn cycle, are you ready to manage that, right? Have you thought through your carry forward? Your foundation budget, your foundation endowment is up, I looked over the last 5 years, 2017 to 2022, your foundation, both restricted and unrestricted, grew faster than every other institution in the state on a percentage basis, 40%. I think I'm right, through 2022. And those things fluctuate, right? Just like the market, and I'm sure you're counting on the foundation to help support key strategies. You might want to pressure test what could happen. So those two things, talent, and in many ways, the national or global economy, that might not be things you can control, but you should be prepared for if you have to make tough decisions.
Vice Chair Mills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, thank you for being here. So glad to have you. And I most appreciate you agreeing to double all of our salaries. So that was fantastic.
It was a tough decision, but somebody had to do it.
Just a couple of questions, if I may, build a little bit more on Trustee Greenway's question in the sense of how you value, or how the BOG values preeminence and the importance of us reaching that on our path to AAU status. And then secondly, you mentioned reduction of regulations, and thank you so much for increasing the flexibility on how we deal with carry forward. We'll have to deal with that here momentarily in our board meeting, but any other highlights that you would point out that we should, might want to exploit?
Yes, sir. So Harold, first of all, but great to see you, as always. I miss our time together. Let me touch on the two questions. First, on preeminence and AAU are critically important. So much so, the earlier question that I didn't mention, the BOG increased its preeminence funding from $100 million in the LBR to $150 million in the LBR this year. The first time, the largest amount we've ever put in since we put preeminence in place. And I'd be more than happy to put more in as institutions achieve that milestone. Last year, 3 institutions got an additional $33 million because of it. It's real money. It's a big deal. And there's more in the pot this year. And I think the governor and I and the legislature are very aligned that creating preeminent institutions allows us to compete nationally, allows us to demonstrate we're getting the outcomes from the funding that we put in. And quite frankly, I think the President Cartwright mentioned around your brand kind of being one of those critical few things that you want some upward trajectory around. I don't think it's a coincidence that University of South Florida was able to become preeminent, spent a lot of time investing in their brand, a lot of the same strategies that President Cartwright is talking about, and they were successful. So in some ways, there's some things that you can replicate knowing you already have tremendous momentum. So I think AAU is an aspirational goal, earning your way there and really setting your sights on preeminence should definitely be on the list. And you will have my support to lean in at the BOG to make that appropriately reward that performance. If you shift over to regulations, or let's more broadly say becoming a more efficient state university system, a couple things that we recently have done that are big decisions that I hope allow this board to make decisions. First, we made a tough decision around auxiliaries. We've never been able to figure out the Rubik's Cube to allow universities to use auxiliaries appropriately to invest in other strategies, might be athletics as an example, and do that in a way that benefits the students, the universities, and do that in a prudent way in the use of funds. You now have that flexibility. The bar is high. Make no mistake, there's a high bar to do that. But this board now has the authority to look at those strategies. And the University of South Florida just used that for the first time. There may be something in the future that makes sense for you all to do it. Carry forward. It's a big one. This board has the authority with your president now to look at carry forward and make decisions to allow you to get projects done, accelerate investments that, again, benefit your students and your faculty. So those are big ones. I mean, we just haven't had those in place. Other ideas might not have dollar signs behind it, but I can tell you some of the reporting requirements and the ask that we have of your staff are a bit burdensome. And they slow your folks down, probably are more expensive than I can articulate, and I think we just have to do a better job as a BOG eliminating some of those requirements. And so you're going to see us come forward with some ideas that effectively further empower the Board of Trustees. You all are approving and reviewing and seeing these reports. You're inspecting for compliance. You've got a chief auditor and a compliance. Like, you've got the infrastructure to do this, and we just have to give you the flexibility to make those decisions. So I think it's a big one. It might not be as visible or as popular as some of the other ones like Carry Forward, but if I'm your staff, it will make a difference in terms of how they do their work. I'm looking for more ideas. So, Vice Chair, if your staff or the board have other ideas around regulations, like, I would think about maybe in one of your next meetings or make a call to me, give us some things to think about so we can go solve it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mills. Other questions? Trustee Altizer.
Thank you. Chair Lamb, it's just a pleasure to have you here today, and I just can't tell you what a treat it is to hear your counsel. So thank you so much for that. I chair the Academic Excellence and Student Success Committee, and it's probably the biggest honor of my career to serve on this board and particularly chair that committee because I am so focused on our students. But I'm also a CPA by trade. And so I like numbers too. So this is kind of more of a smaller detail question. I just wanted your opinion on it. We approved yesterday a report that will go to the BOG on market tuition programs. That's a new regulation for it to come through us. So I'm just wondering, you know, we're looking at revenue diversification. We're also looking at serving our community, you know, in a continuing education area. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Sure. You know, so first of all, accountant to accountant, it's nice to meet you. And I always say there's a debit and a credit to everything. And so market-based tuition it's a little tricky, right? And I don't think there's like some broad unified model. I think it's program by program. And that may seem burdensome, but if you get it wrong, the narrative on that could be pretty negative. I think the way you guys are approaching it, by the way, I have awareness on what you're submitting, and I think you're approaching it the right way. My 2 cents is, on those market-based programs, get input early and often. I definitely think you should have your student trustee. If they aren't on your committee, they should be. And their voice matters because they represent the constituency and can give you perspective on what are they hearing around how we're approaching market-based tuition. Is it going to disadvantage folks in a way that wasn't intended? You also have colleagues around the state that are doing similar things. So pick up the phone and call 1 or 2 of the other institutions. Call one of the other trustees. I'm happy to make introductions that are chairing your committee, which, by the way, is a very important committee. And they might be able to share best practices or where they've kind of run into roadblocks and looking at the model around, you know, market-based tuition. I'm in favor for it. I think it's a competitive marketplace, and where we can use competitive market rates, so far the market has responded to it. Secondly, there's a lot of demand. If you're targeted, I call it the tip of the spear, right? Like, if you're targeted on the right degree, there's a line at the door of talented faculty and staff that want to participate in that program. And so size demand, like, don't fool yourself. Someone in the room be devil's advocate and say, are you sure there's the right level of demand? Is this like the 9th program like this in the state university system? You know, or the community college, Valencia going to stand one up as well. Like, be brutally honest about supply and demand. And I think if you get that right and you look at it program by program, we're very open to that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm glad you're enjoying serving, by the way, but we are equally as lucky to have you to serve.
Thank you.
So,
Appreciate that.
thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Chair Lamb, I can't thank you enough. You're a busy man, and we appreciate you taking the time to address the board, spending some time with us. We appreciate your leadership for sure. I personally have thoroughly enjoyed working alongside you. I would tell you that at UCF, we are laser focused on becoming preeminent. We are laser focused on being a top 50 university. We're laser focused on getting to AAU. And we greatly appreciate the assistance that you and the BOG have provided to help us get there. But we're going to need to continue to get your help. Resources, as you know, are one of the biggest hurdles to overcome in reaching those benchmarks. We appreciate your support, and we'll be knocking on the door again and hope that we can get your support moving forward. But we thank you for all that support in the past, and we appreciate you taking the time to address the board today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. See you, brother.
Okay, trustees, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did.
Yeah. Thank you.
Again, we appreciate Chair Lamb being with us.